A man who refuses to be touched. A woman who doesn't believe in boundaries. When Sophia Morris joins Smith Enterprises as Henry Smith's assistant, she has no idea about his infamous rule. If this love story speaks to your heart, one simple subscribe means the world to us. Help us reach our 1,000 subscriber milestone. Before we start the story, leave a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The atmosphere at Smith Enterprises was especially tense that morning. The usually busy hallways were filled with whispers and curious glances. The rule in question was simple but firm. Henry Smith didn't touch women. Not a handshake, not even an accidental brush against someone. Over the years, the female employees had grown used to this peculiarity. Some thought it was just billionaire eccentricity, while others had wild theories about some mysterious trauma. The fact remained no one dared to get too close to him. But Sophia Morris, the newly hired personal assistant, knew nothing about this. It was her first day, and she couldn't understand why the atmosphere felt so heavy. The looks people gave her were a mix of pity and curiosity, as if she were a lamb walking straight into the lion's den. Emma, the executive secretary, called out urgently, "Mr. Smith needs a tie. Grab one and take it to him now." Sophia walked to the executive dressing room and opened the cabinet where Henry's ties were kept. That's when a small problem arose. There were about 50 of them. "All right, what color would a cold, untouchable CEO wear?" she murmured to herself. She picked a navy blue one, then a black one, then a gray one. Then she panicked and grabbed them all. With her arms full of ties, she marched toward the CEO's office. She just had to go in, hand him the tie, and leave. Simple. She knocked on the door. "Come in." Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside and found Henry Smith standing by his desk, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt with the usual expression of someone who had just solved a financial crisis before breakfast. Sophia dropped all the ties onto the desk and randomly picked one to hand to him. Sophia smiled, relieved. Mission accomplished. Now all she had to do was quietly walk out, and then she saw it. Henry was tying his tie the wrong way. Without thinking too much, she stepped closer and raised her hands. "Wait, you're doing it wrong. Let me." And then she touched him. The moment her fingers brushed against the skin of his neck, Henry froze. Sophia felt his body tense under her fingertips. The sudden shift in the air was almost visible. And then suddenly, Henry jumped back as if he'd been electrocuted. Sophia's eyes widened. "Oh my God, what happened?" "You touched me." I was just fixing your tie?" "Never do that again." "Okay, relax. I'm not radioactive, you know." "You don't understand. I can't be touched." "What do you mean can't? Do you explode? Turn into a frog?" "This is not a joke." Sophia fell silent. His tone was pure desperation. He was really shaken. Henry looked away, his jaw visibly clenched. "Just don't do it again." She hesitated, not knowing exactly what to say. She had never imagined someone could react so badly to a simple touch. But as she looked at his face, she saw something beyond anger. He was terrified. Sophia let out a sigh and raised her hands in surrender. "All right, I won't touch you again." Henry's shoulders relaxed just slightly, but he still looked tense. "You can go." She walked out of the office in a hurry, completely clueless about what had just happened. The entire office seemed to be a sea of curious stares as Sophia Morris walked out of the CEO's office, her face slightly flushed and her expression confused. She walked to her desk and dropped into her chair, massaging her temples. Her first day was already starting to feel like a disaster. The voice of Max Turner, the head of the finance department, sounded beside her. He was a man in his mid-30s, always carrying a cup of coffee and wearing the expression of someone who had seen it all in this company. "So, you survived." "What do you mean by survived?" "No one touches Henry." "Okay, this is getting weird. Why not?" "Because he just can't stand it. He has this rule no woman can touch him." "Well, he could have warned me before having a meltdown, right?" "Wait a second. You touched him? Yes. But it was his fault. He had his tie all wrong, and my need for order took over, so I just fixed it. You put your hands on him? I just fixed his tie. Congratulations, Sophia. You just broke 20 years of protocol. Oh, please. No one dies from an accidental touch. Little did she know, inside the CEO's office, Henry was completely unsettled. He shouldn't be thinking about this. He should be focusing on work. But as he held a gold pen in his hand and tried to review a multi-million-dollar contract, his mind dragged him back to the past, a past he had avoided at all costs. 20 years ago. Henry wasn't yet the financial mogul he was today. Back then, he was just a young heir trying to prove his worth in a world of giants. And like any young and ambitious man, he believed in love. His heart belonged to Amelia Wright, a woman with a sweet smile and captivating eyes. He had given himself completely to that relationship, believing Amelia was his partner, his confidant, his future wife. Until the day he discovered the truth. She didn't love him. She loved his money, his status, his influence. And when a more powerful man entered the picture, she left him without hesitation. The breakup wasn't just painful, it was humiliating. Henry remembered the scene as if it had happened yesterday. Amelia holding his hands and saying, in the coldest voice imaginable, "You were never enough." Those words cut into him like sharp blades. That was the moment something inside him broke. That was when he realized that human touch could deceive, that affection could be fake, that any closeness could be a trap. And so he built his rule. 20 years without touching anyone, until Sophia Morris. His heart was beating faster than usual. He would not allow a simple assistant to shake everything he had built. Sophia was sitting at her desk, chewing on a granola bar while reviewing a document on her computer. Everything seemed normal, until she felt a pair of eyes practically burning into her. She looked up and saw Henry Smith standing in front of her with the most serious expression she had ever seen. She almost choked. "Mr. Smith? From now on, we will keep our relationship strictly professional." Wait, wasn't that already obvious? No jokes, no touching, no unnecessary proximity. Sorry, boss, but unnecessary proximity. We barely talk outside of work. What do you think I'm doing? Trying to seduce you? I didn't say that. But you're acting like I'm some kind of threat to your existence. He opened his mouth to argue, but found no words. Because deep down, she was right. He was overreacting. But he needed to react this way. It was the only way to regain control. The next day, Sophia decided to keep her distance. She simply handed him reports, kept things strictly formal, and didn't interact beyond what was necessary. But to her surprise, he seemed irritated by it. Henry Smith was trying to make amends in some way. Tonight, he had to attend a charity auction, an event filled with business executives, investors, and socialites, pretending to care about noble causes, while competing to see who could spend the most money on auctioned items. And to make things worse, he needed to bring a date. Traditionally, CEOs of major companies attended these events with a companion. It could be a business partner, a fiancé, or an influential friend. In Henry's case, all options were equally irritating. And then, without thinking too much, he made an impulsive decision. "Sophia, I have a charity event tonight. I need a date. You're coming with me." "Excuse me?" "It's a charity auction. Simple event. You just need to be there, remain discreet, and represent the company by my side. You've spent the past few days making it very clear that you don't want unnecessary closeness. And now you want me to go to an event with you." "Yes." "Mr. Smith, I don't know if you've noticed, but you're sending some very mixed signals." "Just accept it, Sophia. It will be better than taking anyone else." "Wow, thanks for the enthusiasm." "Dress appropriately. I'll pick you up at 7. Sophia opened her mouth to reply but gave up. If he wanted to take her to the event, who was she to refuse? At exactly 7 p.m., Sophia was ready. Unlike her usual casual look at the office, tonight she was stunning. Her black, thin-strapped dress hugged her curves with elegance, nothing too extravagant. The flowing fabric highlighted her graceful posture. Her hair, usually tied up in a messy bun at work, now cascaded in soft waves. When Henry arrived, dressed in a flawless black tuxedo, he paused for a second when he saw her. They walked to the car, and minutes later, they arrived at the luxurious event hall. The atmosphere was sophisticated glittering chandeliers, classical music playing softly in the background, and waiters serving champagne. Sophia glanced around, noticing how many eyes were on Henry. "You seem pretty popular here." "Popular isn't the right word." "Oh, right. You're the mysterious CEO who doesn't touch women. I bet half these people are trying to figure out how someone convinced you to bring a date." "Please, watch your words." "Oh, but where's the fun in that?" As they spoke, several guests began approaching Henry to greet him. He maintained his usual composed demeanor, responding politely to each one. Sophia, on the other hand, couldn't help but notice an unwelcome presence. A tall blonde woman with sharp eyes was walking toward them. Her red dress stood out against her fair skin, and her smile was calculated. Sophia felt the tension in the air. This was Amelia Wright, the woman who had broken Henry's heart years ago, and judging by the look in her eyes, their story was far from forgotten. "I'm surprised to see you here with a date," Amelia said, eyeing Sophia carefully. Sophia saw an opportunity to have a little fun. She slipped her arm through Henry's and smiled warmly. "Oh, he's a gentleman. He'd never let me come alone." "Is that so?" "Well, Henry has always been reserved. Maybe he was just waiting for the right person to break that reserve." Amelia studied her, but didn't respond. Then, without another word, she walked away. Henry let out a heavy sigh. That was unnecessary. "I refuse to let an ex downplay my presence. You enjoy causing trouble, don't you? Let's just say I'm good at leveling the playing field." Henry watched her for a few seconds longer than he should have. There was something different about her. She wasn't afraid of him. She wasn't intimidated. And for the first time that night, he realized that maybe having her by his side wasn't so bad. Hours later, when they finally left the event, Sophia was exhausted. She sank into the car seat and let out a long sigh. That was more exhausting than a full day at the office. Henry simply drove in silence. She watched him for a moment. "So, was the event a success?" He nodded. Sophia smiled. "And what about me? Did I pass as a formal event companion?" Henry glanced at her briefly before turning his focus back to the road. "You were tolerable. Is that the closest thing to a compliment I'm going to get?" He didn't answer. But for the first time that night, a faint, almost imperceptible smile appeared on his face. Sophia noticed, and she liked what she saw. When they reached the entrance of her building, she turned to Henry before stepping out. "Thanks for taking me." He nodded. "Good night, Sophia." She smiled and got out of the car. As Henry watched the door of the building close behind her, he felt something strange. He should have been relieved that the night was over. But somehow, he wasn't. And that more than anything else left him completely confused. The next day, Henry had a corporate event on the rooftop of one of the city's most luxurious hotels. He knew Sophia would be there. Her job required it. The moment he arrived, his eyes immediately found her. Sophia wore a deep wine-colored dress, elegant, perfectly fitted, with an open-back design that revealed just enough. Her hair fell in soft waves, and the smile she gave to those around her was bright, effortless, too easy. Henry hated the way he felt when he saw her like that. He didn't know exactly what it was, but if he had to describe it, he'd say it felt like possessiveness. And that was dangerous. Then, he saw something that crossed the line. Sophia was at the bar, talking to a man Henry knew well. A charming businessman, smooth, well known for his flirtatious ways, and never missing an opportunity with a beautiful woman. Henry saw the exact moment Nathan placed his hand on Sophia's waist. Something inside him snapped. Without thinking, he crossed the room quickly. Sophia was laughing at something Nathan had said when she felt a presence beside her. Before she could react, Henry gripped her arm. Henry? Nathan raised an eyebrow. Well, if it isn't Henry Smith. Are you interrupting something? Henry ignored the comment and looked straight at Sophia. I need to talk to you. Now. She blinked, confused. We're in the middle of a conversation. Can it wait a minute? Henry didn't answer. He only tightened his hold slightly, just enough for her to feel the tension in his touch. Nathan chuckled, as if he understood everything. Relax, Henry. I wasn't going to steal your girl. Sophia's eyes widened. What? No. But Henry was already pulling her away. He led her to a more secluded area of the rooftop, away from prying eyes. Sophia yanked her arm free and crossed her arms. What is your problem? Henry ran a hand through his hair, exhaling deeply. He was touching you. She blinked. So what? It was just a casual touch. He met her eyes, unwavering. I didn't like it. Sophia was speechless for a moment. Then slowly, a teasing smile formed on her lips. Henry, are you jealous? He swallowed hard. No. Then what's the reason for all of this? He had no answer. Sophia stepped closer. Tell me the truth. There is no truth, he said, voice low. She tilted her head, studying him. So if I did it again with another man, you wouldn't care. Henry closed his eyes for a brief second. Then, before he could stop himself, he gripped the back of her neck and kissed her. It was fast, intense, no hesitation. Sophia froze for a second, but then she kissed him back, grabbing him by the lapels of his jacket. The world around them disappeared. The noise of the party faded. All that existed was their touch. Henry was the one to pull away first. He opened his eyes slowly and saw Sophia staring at him, surprised, breathless, and that's when reality hit him. This should never have happened, he said, his tone cold. Sophia blinked. What? He took a step back. It was a mistake. She crossed her arms, eyes locked on his. So you kiss me like that and now decide it was a mistake? Henry didn't know what to say. He could still taste her on his lips. His body still burned where she had touched him. Forget it, he said, forcing his voice to stay cold. Sophia let out a sarcastic laugh. Henry, you are unbelievable. He turned to leave, but before he could take more than 2 steps, he felt her hand on his arm again. Don't run. He stopped, but he didn't look at her. She stepped closer. You kissed me, Henry. You pulled me in. And now you want to pretend it didn't happen? He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to regain control. Then, without turning around, he said the only thing that could push her away. It was just an impulse. That's all. Sophia stood still. Henry felt the tension in her silence. Then, she let go of his arm. All right, she said. If that's how you want to play this, then we'll play it that way. In the days following the kiss, he did everything in his power to pretend it never happened. He ignored Sophia at the office, buried himself in meetings and contracts, anything to keep his mind occupied. He created even more professional distance, refusing to let their eyes meet for more than a few seconds. But none of it worked. It was late at night when Sophia finally cornered him. Henry was leaving the office when he saw her standing next to his car. She was waiting for him, arms crossed, determination written all over her face. With a sigh, he walked toward her. Sophia, what are you doing here? I'm waiting for you to stop acting like an idiot. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. You're just making it complicated. Henry unlocked the car, but before he could open the door, Sophia placed her hand over his. The touch was soft but electric. He froze. She stepped closer. Tell me the truth, Henry. He tried to pull away, but she held firm. Do you want me? Yes or no? Henry shut his eyes. Then he told the truth. Yes, Sophia smiled. Then stop running. He looked at her. What if I mess this up? She laughed. You already are. Henry knew she was right, and in that moment, he made his decision. He let out a heavy breath. And then he pulled Sophia into a kiss. This time, he didn't pull back. No fear, no hesitation, no intention of letting her go. He held Sophia firmly, deepening the kiss with all the intensity he'd been trying to deny. Then, thunder rumbled in the sky. They pulled apart just enough to realize the rain was coming. Sophia laughed, her hand still gripping his shirt. Looks like the universe wants to make this scene even more dramatic. Henry glanced up at the heavy clouds overhead, and then he made a decision. Get in the car. Sophia studied him for a moment. Then she smiled and obeyed. The first few minutes inside the car were silent. Sophia leaned back in her seat, crossing her arms. So, is this the part where you run again? Henry didn't look away. No. Good, she smiled. Because I was getting tired of that. But Henry still wasn't fully ready. He kept their relationship a secret. He never did anything to make it official. And Sophia noticed. And on a Wednesday, everything finally exploded. Sophia was called into a meeting with Henry and the company's other executives. Throughout the entire meeting, he barely looked at her. He acted as if nothing had ever happened between them. And that was the last straw. As soon as the meeting ended, Sophia followed him into his office and shut the door behind her. Henry turned around, surprised. What is it? Sophia didn't waste any time. What do you want from me, Henry? He frowned. What are you talking about? Do you want me? Yes or no? He said nothing. Sophia took a step closer. Because if you don't, then tell me now. But if you do, then stop treating me like a stranger in front of everyone else. Henry felt a tightness in his chest. He knew he had to make a choice, but he still wasn't ready. So he made a mistake. Maybe it's best if we end this. Sophia froze for a moment. She said nothing. Then she laughed. But it wasn't amusement, it was bitterness. She grabbed her bag and headed for the door. Congratulations, Henry. You got what you wanted. And then she was gone. This time, Henry didn't stop her. And that was the biggest mistake of his life. In the days that followed, Henry became a different man. He was still the same ruthless, disciplined CEO. But inside, he was a mess. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't eat properly. And worst of all, he couldn't stop thinking about her. But Sophia wasn't going to wait for him. On Friday night, she went out with friends. Henry only found out because, by chance, he saw a picture of her on social media. She was at a bar, smiling, holding a colorful drink in her hand. And next to her, there was a man. He couldn't breathe properly. This wasn't just jealousy, it was panic. Because for the first time, Henry realized she could actually move on without him. And he wasn't ready for that. That same night, he went after her. When he walked into the bar and saw Sophia laughing, enjoying herself, he knew he had to do something. So he walked straight to her. Sophia noticed him instantly, and she didn't hide her surprise. What are you doing here? Then Sophia narrowed her eyes. Oh, I see. You pushed me away and now you show up stalking me? Henry felt his stomach twist. I need to talk to you. Sophia let out a sharp laugh, crossing her arms. No. Henry froze. Sophia, please. Now you say please? Where was that humility when you tossed me aside like I was a problem? Henry had no answer. Sophia took a deep breath and grabbed her purse. You know what? Let's just get this over with. Say what you need to say. Henry hesitated, but he knew he couldn't run anymore. So he said the only thing that mattered. I love you, Sophia. Sophia went still. What? She asked, like she wasn't sure she had heard him right. Henry took a deep breath. I love you. Sophia didn't say a word. Then she laughed, but it was nervous laughter. Really? Now you decide to tell me this? Henry's heart pounded. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but Sophia cut him off. Henry, I waited so long to hear that. She sighed, looking at him. But now, I don't know if I still want to. If you really love me, you'll have to prove it. And then she walked away. This time, he knew. He had to chase after her. Because if he didn't, he would lose her forever. Sophia Morris was the only thing in his life that made sense, and he was going to prove it. The next morning, Sophia was at her desk, trying to focus on work, when she heard a commotion. Murmurs, whispers, people turning around, some holding up their phones as if they were recording something. She frowned. "What's going on?" she asked. Max, who was staring down the hallway, smirked. "I think your boss has lost his mind." Before she could ask, Henry Smith appeared. But not like usual. He wasn't wearing his perfectly tailored suit. He didn't look serious or intimidating. He was barefoot, holding a massive bouquet of flowers, and his suit was completely drenched. Sophia nearly choked on her coffee. Henry looked nervous, clearly uncomfortable, but he kept walking, determined. He stopped right in front of her desk, and then he knelt down. The entire office froze. Sophia was speechless. Everyone held their breath. And then Henry spoke. "Sophia Morris." He swallowed hard, looking like a man who had never been this vulnerable in his life. "I was an idiot. A complete, absolute, ridiculous idiot." Someone in the back muttered, "That's true." Henry shot them a deadly glare. Then, he turned back to Sophia. "I ran because I was scared. Because I've never felt anything like this before. Because you, Sophia, did something no one else ever has." Sophia still wasn't sure if this was real, or if she had hit her head and was hallucinating. But Henry kept going. "You made me feel. And now I don't want to run anymore. I don't want to spend another second without you. Because without you, nothing makes sense." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Sophia's eyes widened. Henry opened it. Inside, a diamond engagement ring sparkled under the light. He gave her a nervous, lopsided smile. "So, Sophia Morris, will you marry me and put up with me for the rest of your life, even though I'm the most stubborn, difficult man on the planet?" The office erupted into murmurs. Sophia felt tears sting her eyes. And then something unexpected happened. She laughed, because this was so ridiculously perfect. So Henry Smith, that she couldn't believe this was the same man who had run from her for so long. She looked at him, kneeling there, and felt her heart overflow. So she gave the only possible answer. "Of course, I'll marry you, you idiot." Henry let out a relieved laugh, took the ring, and slid it onto her finger. And the moment she looked at him again, he kissed her. Right there, in the middle of the office, in front of everyone, and no one had ever seen Henry Smith so happy. Months later, Sophia still couldn't believe it was real. She stood in front of the mirror, wearing a stunning wedding dress, trying to process the fact that in just a few minutes, she would become Henry Smith's wife. His wife. If someone had told her this months ago, she would have laughed. But now, looking at her reflection, she knew that everything had happened exactly the way it was meant to. The door opened, and Max stepped inside. "Are you ready?" Sophia took a deep breath, smiled, and nodded. More than ever. Henry stood at the altar, more nervous than he had ever been in any business meeting in his life. He knew this was what he wanted, what he had always wanted. She walked toward him, her smile radiant. And when she stopped by his side, Henry took her hand and whispered, "You look absolutely stunning," Sophia smiled, "and you're sweating." He chuckled. And then the wedding began. The vows were emotional. Sophia made Henry laugh and cry at the same time, and when it was time to say "I do," Henry didn't hesitate for even a second, because for the first time in his life, he was absolutely certain of what he wanted, and what he wanted was Sophia. The reception was unforgettable. Max gave a speech that left half the guests laughing until they cried. Sophia dragged Henry onto the dance floor, even though he insisted he didn't know how to dance. And at the end of the night, as they watched the fireworks light up the sky, Henry pulled her into a tight embrace. "I never thought I'd be able to have this," he admitted. Sophia smiled against his chest. "Have what?" He looked into her eyes. "Someone like you." Sophia kissed him gently. "Well, get used to it, because now you're stuck with me." Henry smiled. because this time, he didn't want to run, he only wanted to stay. Forever. What did you think of Henry and Sophia's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to keep up with all our stories.